I'm Laura, and for as long as I can remember, I've always had a very special relationship with my godfather, Joao. To better understand this story, it's important to know who we are and how our relationship has developed over the years. Since I was little, I lived in a house full of love and laughter. Our family was very close, and Joao was always present on all important occasions. He was that type of person who lit up any room with his smile and positive energy. He was like a second father to me, always willing to listen, give advice, and protect. My mother and Joao had known each other since childhood, and this deep friendship naturally extended to me. Joao was a constant presence in our lives, and I always felt a special affection for him. Our house was big, surrounded by a lush garden, where my brothers and I spent hours playing. On weekends, it was common to have barbecues and family gatherings, where Joao was always present, telling stories and making everyone laugh. The trust between us was unshakable. I knew I could count on him for anything, from helping with problems at school to more serious conversations about life. He was always a great listener, someone who didn't judge but offered words of wisdom. This connection became a foundation in my life, a secure base that I could always lean on. However, there was one night that changed everything. It was a silent dawn, and I was already lying in my room, ready to sleep. The house was in profound silence. Everyone had already retired. Suddenly, I heard a slight creak at the door. My heart skipped a beat, but I soon thought it was one of my brothers. However, when I opened my eyes, I saw Joao's silhouette standing in the doorway of my room. I was surprised and a little confused to see him there in the middle of the night. I asked quietly if everything was okay, and he said yes, but his voice carried an emotion that I couldn't identify. He entered the room, sat on the edge of my bed, and started talking. He talked about how alone he was feeling, how difficult things were for him. There was a vulnerability in his voice that I had never heard before. As he spoke, my mind was in a whirlwind. I felt empathy for him. I wanted to help him, but there was something about the way he looked at me, the way his hand caressed my arm, that left me confused. It wasn't just paternal affection. There was an intensity, an emotional charge that I didn't know how to deal with. I always trusted Joao blindly, and at that moment, that trust was put to the test. There was a mixture of conflicting feelings inside me. He started talking about how important I had always been to him, how my presence brightened his life. His words were affectionate, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. That night was the beginning of a series of events that would forever change our relationship and our family dynamics. I found myself caught between loyalty and growing confusion about the feelings he seemed to be revealing. That night marked the beginning of a complicated emotional journey where trust, affection, and vulnerability intertwined in ways I never could have predicted. And so begins the story of how a relationship that seemed unshakable was tested in ways I never imagined. A story that taught me a lot about the complexity of human emotions and the fragility of trust. It was a night like any other, or at least it seemed to be. I was in my room, ready to sleep after a long day. Silence reigned in the house. Everyone was already in their rooms. I always liked that moment of peace before falling asleep, when I could relax and let my thoughts wander freely. That night, however, had a different feel. There was something in the air, something I couldn't identify. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the silence felt heavier than usual. I lay down, closed my eyes, and tried to shake off any strange sensations. convincing myself that I was just tired. Time passed slowly, and I was almost falling asleep when I heard a slight creak at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I opened my eyes quickly. At first, I thought it was one of my brothers getting up to go to the bathroom, but the sound continued, and I soon realized that my bedroom door was slowly opening. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The darkness of the room was broken only by the soft moonlight that came through the window, creating shadows that danced on the walls. I tried to focus on the approaching figure, and then I recognized him. It was my godfather, Joao. Surprise took over me, and I sat on the bed wondering what he was doing there at that time. "John," my voice came out in a whisper. "Everything is fine?" He entered the room, closing the door behind him. There was something in his expression that I couldn't decipher, a mixture of sadness and determination. He approached the bed and sat on the edge, looking at me with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Laura," he began, his voice low and full of emotion. "I needed to talk to you. There's something that's been bothering me for a long time, and I can't keep it to myself anymore." My mind was racing. What could be so important that he would come to my room in the middle of the night? I tried to remain calm, but the feeling of strangeness only increased. His eyes met mine, and I could see the vulnerability in them. He had always been a rock, a figure of strength and stability in my life, and seeing him like this, so vulnerable, was disconcerting. "You've always been very special to me, Laura," he continued, his hand finding mine and squeezing it gently. "Ever since you were little, I have always felt a unique connection with you. I see you as a light in my life, something that brings me joy even in the most difficult times." His words were tender, but there was an intensity to them that I couldn't ignore. My mind was in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I got a little closer, trying to understand what he meant by all that. The tension in the air was palpable, and I felt a mixture of confusion and something else, something I couldn't name. "John, I don't know what to say," I murmured, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine. He gave a slight smile, but his eyes remained serious. "No need to say anything right now. I just wanted to let you know how much you mean to me. Sometimes life puts us in situations we don't know how to handle, and I think that's happening to me." That specific night changed everything. The house, once a haven of peace, now seemed full of unknowns. The silence that once comforted me was now heavy and full of unspoken meanings. I found myself caught in a web of conflicting emotions, not knowing exactly how to act or what to think. Joao's presence in my room that morning marked the beginning of a series of events that I could never have predicted. That night, something inside me felt that things would not be the same. I was lying in bed, listening to the silence of the house. It was already dawn, and everything seemed calm, but there was a strange feeling in the air. I was almost falling asleep when I heard the soft creak of the door opening. I lifted my head, trying to see through the dim light. To my surprise, I saw Joao's figure slowly entering my room. My heart raced, and my mind became confused. What was he doing there in the middle of the night? I asked quietly if everything was okay, and he responded with a nod, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't place. He closed the door behind him and approached the bed, sitting on the edge. The soft light of the moon illuminated his face, revealing a serious but also affectionate expression. Joao was always a safe haven for me, and seeing him there at that moment mixed feelings of security and uncertainty. "Laura," he began, his voice an emotion-filled whisper, "I needed to talk to you." "There's something that's been bothering me for a long time." His hand found mine, squeezing it gently. His touch was familiar, but in this situation, it seemed charged with a new intensity. I was confused, not knowing how to react. He was always affectionate with me, but that night, there was something more, something I couldn't decipher. "You've always been very special to me," he continued. "Ever since you were little, I have felt a unique connection with you. You are a light in my life, someone who brings me joy even in the most difficult times." My emotions were in turmoil. His words were tender and comforting, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. His closeness, the touch of his hand, the tone of his voice, it all left me breathless and confused. Joao continued to speak, his words filled with sincerity and affection. "Sometimes life puts us in sticky situations, and I think that's what's happening to me right now. I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me." He leaned in a little more, and I could feel his closeness, the heat of his body radiating into mine. My heart was pounding, and I was torn between the security he always provided me and the strangeness of that situation. His attitude was affectionate and seemingly innocent, but there was an emotional charge that I couldn't ignore. That night, the line between familial affection and something more began to blur. I was stuck in a mix of emotions, not knowing how to deal with it. Joao was my godfather, my confidant, someone I always admired and trusted. But that morning, he became someone I could no longer fully understand. That night marked the beginning of a complex emotional journey where trust and affection intertwine in unexpected ways. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew nothing would be the same as before. And so, the story of how a relationship that seemed unshakable was put to the test began to unfold. Every interaction with him was full of tension and unresolved emotion. Family dynamics, which were always so simple and harmonious, became complex and confusing. In the following days, I tried to act normally, but every time I met Joao, I felt a mixture of feelings that left me disoriented. There was a part of me that still saw him as the loving, protective godfather I had always known, but another part was constantly reminded of the intensity and confession of that night. At family gatherings, everything seemed the same on the surface. We laughed, talked, and shared moments together, but I knew something had changed. There was an elephant in the room, an underlying tension that only the two of us could feel. I noticed the looks he gave me, full of meaning and emotion, and I tried not to let the confusion I felt show. Dealing with these contradictory feelings was a daily struggle. There were times when I felt guilty for not realizing it sooner, for not understanding what he was feeling. Other times, I felt angry at him for breaking the trust we had, for putting this weight on me. And there were also moments of sadness, knowing that our relationship would never be the same again. I sought support from close friends and my mother, without revealing the whole truth, just saying that I was going through a difficult time. They were my rock, offering words of encouragement and understanding, even though I didn't know exactly what was going on. This helped me maintain a facade of normalcy, while internally I tried to sort out my feelings. Over time, I began to reflect on what I could learn from this situation. I learned about the complexity of human emotions, about how feelings can evolve and transform in unexpected ways. I learned about the importance of open and honest communication, and the boundaries we need to set to protect our own hearts. Deciding how to move forward was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. I knew that continuing as I was not sustainable. So I had a serious talk with Joao. I talked about how I felt, about the confusion and pain that his confession had caused. He listened silently, with a sad but understanding expression. "John, I value our relationship very much, and I always will," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need to find a way to move forward that is healthy for both of us. Maybe we need some distance so we can process all of this and find a new balance." He agreed, although clearly reluctant. We knew it would be difficult, but we also knew it was necessary. We decided he would spend some time away, giving us space to reflect and heal. This decision was painful but essential. Little by little, the tension began to ease, and I began to find a new form of normality. I learned to deal with my feelings, to accept the complexity of the situation, and to move forward with my head held high. What happened between Joao and me was a life lesson. I learned about the importance of setting clear boundaries and being honest with my own feelings. And, above all, I learned that, even in the midst of confusion and pain, it is possible to find a way to move forward, valuing the lessons learned and the experiences lived. This journey has been difficult, but it has made me stronger and more aware of who I am and what I need to be happy. And despite everything, I cherish the good memories of the relationship we had, knowing that, in some way, these experiences contributed to my personal growth.